The laughter echoed through the obsidian halls of Fortress Vexthara, like the dying gasps of 1,000 worlds. General Kira Voss stood at the threshold of the throne room, her combat boots silent against the polished stone that had been carved from the bones of conquered civilizations. The massive doors, each one forged from the hulls of destroyed human vessels, groaned shut behind her. With mechanical finality, 300 Kethmori warriors filled the cavernous chamber, their chitinous exoskeletons gleaming under the blood-red luminescence of captured suns. Suspended from the vaulted ceiling, each stood over 8 feet tall, their forearms ending in natural bone blades that could slice through titanium armor like paper. Their compound eyes, multifaceted jewels of malevolent intelligence, tracked her movement with predatory anticipation. At the chamber's heart, upon a throne built from the fused skulls of a dozen species, sat Warlord Thexanel the Worldbreaker, his massive form dwarfed even his elite guard. Standing nearly 10 feet in height with additional cybernetic limbs grafted to his torso, plasma cannons had replaced his natural arms, their energy cores pulsing with enough power to level city blocks. The Warlord's head crest, adorned with the preserved faces of human commanders he had personally slaughtered, caught the light as he leaned forward. The last human general. Thexanel's voice resonated through the chamber, synthesized through vocal implants that could shatter reinforced glass. I expected an army. Instead, they send me this. The assembled warriors clicked their mandibles in what passed for Kethmori laughter, a sound like breaking bones. Kira counted them methodically, 40 near the entrance, 60 flanking the throne, 200 scattered throughout the chamber's alcoves and galleries, all armed, all eager. She had studied their psychological profiles for months. The Kethmori valued strength above all else, measured worth through brutality, and respected only those who could match their savagery. Diplomacy was weakness, negotiation was surrender. There was only conquest or death. Your fleet burns in the void above Kepler 442. Thexanel continued, rising from his throne. Each step shook the floor, his weight supported by hydraulic leg braces that hissed with each movement. Your colonies are ash. Your homeworld's children serve as fuel for our war machines. Tell me, little general, what makes you think you deserve to breathe the same air as warriors? Kira remained motionless, her hands empty and visible. She wore no armor, carried no visible weapons, just the standard issue uniform of the Terran Defense Corps, now faded and stained from 3 years of continuous warfare. Her blonde hair, streaked with premature gray from combat stress, was pulled back in a simple ponytail. To the alien warriors, she appeared utterly defenseless. I came to discuss terms, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber despite its modest volume. The laughter intensified. Several warriors began clicking their claws against their weapons, plasma rifles, neural disruptors, molecular flensors that could strip flesh from bone while keeping the victim conscious. They had grown bored with easy conquests. A lone human, walking voluntarily into their stronghold, represented entertainment. Terms? Thexanel's head crest flared, displaying the full collection of human faces sewn into the flesh. You mistake me for some primitive species that negotiates. The Kethmori do not bargain. We take. He gestured with one plasma cannon, and the warriors began to close in, forming concentric circles around Kira. Their movements were coordinated. Professional, these were not mindless beasts, but seasoned killers, who had perfected the art of terror over countless campaigns. Your species has one value to us, the Warlord continued, descending the steps of his throne. Entertainment. How long can a human survive when we begin removing pieces? Our xenobiologists estimate 47 minutes if we're careful. Kira's pulse remained steady at 60 beats per minute. She had trained for this moment, prepared for every possible scenario. The micro-explosives implanted along her spine would detonate if her heart rate exceeded 100 BPM or dropped below 40. The neural interface wired into her brainstem had been calibrated to trigger on specific biometric readings. Everything depended on perfect timing. I have a counter-proposal, she said. The nearest warrior, a veteran with acid-scarred carapace and trophies from a dozen worlds, hanging from his weapon harness, leaned close enough that she could smell the copper tang of blood on his breath. Humans don't propose, they scream. Kira smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. The smile triggered something primitive in the HFY warrior's consciousness, a prey animal's instinctive recognition of a predator's patience. He stepped back, raising his neural disruptor, but Kira was already moving. Her left hand, which had appeared empty and relaxed, now held a monomolecular wire so thin it was invisible to the naked eye. The filament, only 20 atoms thick, sliced through the warrior's weapon and 3 of his forearms before he could process what was happening. Green ichor sprayed across the obsidian floor as the severed limbs hit the ground with wet impacts. The chamber erupted into chaos. Kira flicked her wrist, and the wire extended to its full 30-foot length, becoming a whip of destruction that could cut through molecular bonds themselves. She spun in a perfect circle, the wire singing through the air at waist height. 12 HFY warriors were bisected in the first revolution, their torsos sliding sideways off their legs in gouts of alien blood. "Kill her!" Vexenal roared, his plasma cannons charging with high-pitched whines. The warriors rushed forward in a wave of chitin and fury. Kira dove and rolled as the first energy blast scorched the air where she had stood. Coming up with her wire already in motion, she caught a warrior by the throat, the monofilament slicing through his neck with such precision that his head remained balanced on his shoulders for 2 full seconds before toppling. A blade whistled past her ear, missing by millimeters. She turned into the attack, grabbing the warrior's wrist and using his momentum to drive his own weapon into his eye socket. Her wire lashed out again, wrapping around another attacker's legs. She yanked hard, and he crashed to the ground as his limbs separated from his body. Plasma fire scorched the air around her, but Kira had studied their tactical formations for months. The HFY were pack hunters who relied on overwhelming numerical advantage, but their size worked against them in close quarters. She stayed mobile, using their own bodies as cover, forcing them to hesitate for fear of hitting their own warriors. A massive warrior with cybernetic implants lunged at her. With all 4 arms extended, Kira dropped to one knee and swept her wire horizontally through his ankles. He pitched forward, and she rose to meet him, driving her elbow into his throat with enough force to crush his windpipe. As he gurgled and fell, she stripped a plasma rifle from his death grip. The weapon felt alien in her hands, too heavy, too wide for human fingers, but she had trained with captured equipment. For over a year, she rolled behind a fallen warrior's corpse and opened fire, the plasma bolts punching through chitinous armor like it was tissue paper. 3 warriors fell before they could adjust to her new position. "Surround her," one of the veterans shouted, trying to coordinate the attack. "Don't let her." His words ended in a wet gargle as Kira's wire found his throat. She was already moving again, vaulting over a pile of bodies to reach a better firing position. The plasma rifle overheated in her hands, so she discarded it and retrieved 2 molecular fluncers from the growing pile of corpses. The HFY were learning, adapting their tactics. They spread out, attacking from multiple angles simultaneously. Kira caught the first attacker with crossed fluncers, the molecular fields intersecting to literally disintegrate his torso. The second warrior's blade scraped along her ribs, drawing first blood and shredding her uniform. She spun away from the third attack, her wire whipping out to catch the warrior's weapon arm and sever it at the shoulder. Blood her own and theirs made the floor treacherous. Kira slipped on a patch of green ichor and nearly fell, recovering just in time to duck under a horizontal blade sweep that would have decapitated her. She came up inside the attacker's guard, driving both fluncers into his abdomen. The molecular fields tore through his internal organs like acid. More plasma fire erupted from the gallery above. Kira looked up to see warriors positioned on the upper levels, trying to get clear shots. She grabbed a thermal detonator from a corpse's equipment harness and hurled it upward. The explosion brought down part of the gallery in a cascade of stone, and bodies dot, but for every warrior she killed, 2 more seemed to take his place. The chamber was vast, and Vexenal had positioned his forces well. They were learning to work around her wire, using longer weapons to stay outside its range. Several had switched to ranged weapons, and the crossfire was becoming impossible to avoid. A plasma bolt clipped her left shoulder, spinning her round and searing through muscle and bone. She stumbled but kept moving, her wire accounting for 3 more warriors before the pain really hit. Another near miss left a line of burned fabric across her back. She was bleeding from a dozen small wounds now, and the HFY were adapting faster than she had anticipated. They had stopped rushing her individually and were coordinating group attacks. 4 warriors moved in perfect synchronization, their blades forming a cage of death around her. Kira smiled again, wider this time. She had been counting. 57. Dead, 243 to go. The coordinated attack came from all sides. 4 warriors moving with practiced precision, their blades formed a contracting diamond of death, each point calculated to drive Kira toward the center where their weapons would meet in her flesh. It was textbook HFY's small unit tactics, the kind of maneuver that had carved through human defensive lines on 17 worlds. Kira waited until the last possible moment. Before triggering the first of her implants, neural boosters flooded her system with synthetic adrenaline and combat stimulants, accelerating her perception and reaction time by a factor of 4. The world slowed to a crawl around her. She could see individual droplets of sweat beating on the warriors' carapaces, count the microscopic scratches on their blade edges, track the precise trajectory of each incoming strike. She dove between 2 of the warriors, rolling under their coordinated sweep. Her wire caught the 3rd warrior's ankle as she passed, and she used his falling body as a springboard to launch herself at the 4th. The monomolecular filament wrapped around his neck 3 times before he hit the ground, his head rolling away like a discarded ball, but the stimulants came with a cost. Her heart rate spiked to 90 beats per minute, dangerously close to the detonation threshold. She forced herself to regulate her breathing, knowing that excitement or panic would trigger the explosives in her spine. More warriors poured into the chamber. From side passages, reinforcements Thexanol had been holding in reserve. Fresh troops, with full weapon loads and undamaged armor. They moved in perfect formation, having learned from watching their comrades die. No more individual heroics or uncoordinated rushes. This was military precision. Kira retreated toward the chamber's center, her back to the Warlord's throne. Thexanol stood watching from the raised dais, his plasma cannons trained on her but not firing. He was enjoying this, studying her techniques, letting his warriors test their new tactics before he delivered the killing blow himself. A squad of 10 warriors formed a firing line, their plasma rifles charging in unison. Kira dove behind a pile of corpses as the volley turned the air above her into superheated plasma. The bodies provided momentary cover, but the molecular cohesion was already breaking down under the energy bombardment. She had seconds before her shelter disintegrated. She triggered her second implant. Reactive armor plating deployed from subcutaneous housings along her arms and torso, unfolding like metallic flowers to form overlapping scales of military-grade ceramics. The transformation took less than 3 seconds, but it felt like an eternity as plasma bolts began punching through her cover. The armor wouldn't stop direct hits, but it might deflect glancing blows. More importantly, it incorporated active camouflage systems that could bend light around her for short periods. She activated the system and rolled out from behind the disintegrating corpses, now effectively invisible. The HFY's compound eyes were excellent at detecting movement, but the camouflage confused their visual processing centers. Kira moved in short, controlled bursts, striking at warriors who couldn't pinpoint her location. Her wire found throats and weapon arms with surgical precision. 3 warriors fell before they adapted, switching to thermal sensors that could track her body heat through the camouflage. A molecular flencer beam swept across her position, missing by inches, but revealing her outline in a shimmering heat distortion. The camouflage flickered and failed as the system overloaded. Kira found herself exposed in the center of the chamber, surrounded by over 100 remaining warriors. Thexanol laughed, the sound echoing off the vaulted ceiling. Clever tricks, little general. But tricks run out. Warriors endure. He was right. The neural boosters were already wearing off, leaving her system crashed and shaking. The reactive armor had multiple breaches where glancing shots had found weak points. Her wire was fouled with alien blood and tissue, its cutting edge compromised. She had perhaps 30 seconds of effective combat capability remaining. The warriors sensed her weakness and pressed their advantage. They attacked en masse. A wave of chitin and steel that would crush her through sheer numbers. Kira triggered her third implant, the one she had hoped never to use. Nanobiological warfare agents released into her bloodstream, designed to be transmitted through contact with alien physiology. The microscopic machines would take time to work, but they were her insurance policy. If she was going to die here, she wouldn't die alone. A blade caught her across the ribs, penetrating the damaged armor and laying her side open to the bone. She stumbled, her wire tangling around her own feet. Another strike opened her scalp, sending blood streaming down her face and into her eyes. A plasma bolt grazed her thigh, burning through muscle and leaving her limping. She was down to her last few seconds. 73 warriors dead, but not enough, not nearly enough. Then she saw a weakness in their formation. The warriors were so focused on her that they had created a gap near the throne's base. If she could reach the warlord himself, if she could force him to fight her directly, the others would have to hold back for fear of hitting their leader. It was a desperate gambit, but desperation was all she had left. Kira gathered her remaining strength and charged toward the throne, her wire whipping out to clear a path through the press of bodies. Warriors fell on both sides, their deaths buying her precious seconds. She could feel her body beginning to shut down, the accumulated damage finally taking its toll. Vexinal's plasma cannons tracked her movement, energy building to lethal levels. She had one card left to play. Kira's final sprint toward the throne was a masterpiece of controlled desperation. Each step had been calculated, every movement designed to force Vexinal into a tactical dilemma. The warlord's plasma cannons tracked her progress, but he couldn't fire without risking his own warriors, who were closing in from all sides. She reached the base of the throne. Just as the first cannon discharged, the plasma bolt vaporized 3 Kethmori warriors who had been pursuing her, their bodies simply ceasing to exist in a flash of superheated light. The warlord's roar of fury shook dust from the ceiling as he realized his mistake. His own eagerness to kill her had cost him 3 elite soldiers. Kira used the confusion to trigger her fourth implant, the one that would either save her life or kill her outright. Molecular rebuilders flooded her system, microscopic machines designed to repair tissue damage in real time. The technology was experimental, barely tested, and had a 60% fatality rate during trials. But it was her only chance of surviving long enough to complete her mission. The rebuilders went to work immediately, sealing wounds and regenerating damaged muscle fiber. The pain was excruciating, like being burned alive from the inside. But her body began to function again. The bleeding stopped. Her limbs regained their strength. Her vision cleared. Vexinal descended from his throne, his massive form blocking out the light from the suspended suns. Above, up close, he was even more imposing, a monument to alien brutality enhanced by the finest military cybernetics. His plasma cannons were integrated directly into his nervous system, responding to thought rather than muscle movement. Additional weapon systems emerged from hidden compartments in his torso: micromissile launchers, sonic disruptors, a gravity field generator that could crush bone. No more tricks, he growled, his voice a subsonic rumble that Kira felt in her chest. No more running. Face me as a warrior should. The remaining Kethmori formed a circle round the throne, giving their leader room to fight while ensuring Kira couldn't escape. They clicked their mandibles in anticipation, knowing they were about to witness a legendary execution. Kira straightened, her wire coiled and ready. The molecular rebuilders had repaired most of the damage, but they were burning through her body's resources at an unsustainable rate. She had minutes at most before system failure. With pleasure, she said, and meant it. THX single quotes, NUL attacked with shocking speed for something so massive. His plasma cannons fired in sequence, the bolts designed to herd her into the path of his physical assault. Kira dodged the first 2 shots and used the third's heat signature to mask her approach. She came in low, her wire aimed at his leg joints. The monomolecular filament met military-grade armor plating and held. For a moment, Kira thought she had found a weak point. The Nexenal's gravity field generator activated, and she was slammed into the stone floor with enough force to crack ribs. She rolled desperately as his foot came down where her head had been, the impact creating a crater in the obsidian. His micromissiles launched in a spread pattern, seeking heat signatures. Kira's camouflage system was dead, leaving her exposed. She dove behind a fallen pillar as the missiles detonated, filling the air with molten fragments. Your species is weak, Nexenal taunted, advancing with measured steps. You rely on tools because your bodies are frail, your minds are slow, your spirits break easily. Kira waited until he rounded the pillar, then struck with everything she had, her wire wrapped around his right plasma cannon, seeking the power coupling at its base. The monomolecular edge began to cut through the housing, sparks showering as it severed power conduits. Nexenal backhanded her with his free arm, the blow launching her 20 feet across the chamber. She hit the wall hard enough to leave a human-shaped indent in the stone. Blood filled her mouth, and she could feel the rebuilders working frantically to repair internal damage. But her attack had succeeded. His right plasma cannon was dead, its power core venting energy in a controlled burn. The Warlord examined the damage with what might have been respect. Better, he acknowledged. Perhaps you will last longer than 47 minutes. He activated his sonic disruptors, and Kira's world exploded into agony. The subsonic waves targeted her inner ear and nervous system, designed to cause maximum pain while keeping the victim conscious. She collapsed, her body convulsing as the sound waves scrambled her neural pathways through the haze of pain. She saw him approaching for the killing blow. His remaining plasma cannon was charging, the energy core building to maximum output. At this range, there would be nothing left of her to interrogate. Kira forced her hand to her throat, pressing the small stud hidden beneath her collar. The signal went out on a tight beam transmission, coded in mathematical sequences that only one recipient would recognize. Somewhere in the debris field above Kepler 442, automated systems received the transmission and began countdown sequences. Nexenal noticed her movement, calling for help. Your fleet is destroyed. Your reinforcements scattered. No one is coming to save you. Kira managed to smile through blood-stained teeth. Not calling for help, she gasped. Calling in the cleanup crew. The Warlord's expression shifted from triumph to confusion to alarm as he processed her words. His enhanced intellect, augmented by quantum processors, began calculating possibilities. At superhuman speed. What did you do? Instead of answering, Kira triggered her fifth implant, the one she had never intended to survive. Her body began to change. The transformation was hideous to witness. Kira's cellular structure began rewriting itself as the fifth implant released its payload and engineered retrovirus that would convert her into something no longer entirely human. Her bones elongated and hardened into organic steel. Her muscles expanded, fibers multiplying and condensing into living cables capable of exerting tons of pressure. Her nervous system accelerated, synapses firing at machine-like speeds. The pain was indescribable, but she welcomed it. Pain meant the process was working. Nexenal stepped back, his remaining plasma cannon tracking her convulsing form. Impossible. Humans don't have biotechnology this advanced. We don't, Kira agreed, her voice deepening as her vocal cords restructured. We stole it from you. The truth hit him like a physical blow. 3 years ago, the Kethmori had raided a human research facility on Titan, slaughtering the scientists and taking their experimental subjects. What they hadn't realized was that the humans had been reverse engineering captured Kethmori. Biotechnology, learning to weaponize their enemies' own evolutionary advantages. Kira had volunteered to be the first successful test subject. The transformation completed in under 30 seconds. Where a human woman had knelt in pain, something else now stood. She was still recognizably Kira, but enhanced beyond normal limitations. Her skin had taken on a metallic sheen. Her eyes now glowed with bioluminescent intensity, and her hands ended in retractable claws that could punch through tank armor. But the real change was internal. Her brain now processed information at superhuman speeds. Her enhanced senses could track individual photons, and her reaction time had been reduced to nanoseconds. "Kill her!" Vexenal roared to his warriors. "Kill her now, before Kira moved." She crossed the 20 feet between them in a single bound, her claws extended. Vexenal's plasma cannon discharged, but she was no longer where the weapon was aimed. She struck his left leg joint with enough force to buckle military-grade armor plating, her claws punching through to sever hydraulic lines. Green fluid sprayed across the throne room as the warlord staggered. His weight-bearing systems began to fail, forcing him to one knee. But he was far from helpless. His micromissile system activated, launching a full spread at point-blank range. Kira's enhanced reflexes allowed her to dodge most of the projectiles, but 3 found their mark. The explosions threw her backward, her newly hardened bones absorbing impacts that would have liquefied a normal human. She landed in a crouch, already assessing the damage and planning her next attack. The surrounding warriors finally overcame their shock and joined the battle. Over 100 Kethmori converged on the throne, their weapons systems charging in unison. But Kira was no longer the desperate human who had entered the chamber. She was something new, something unprecedented. She leaped into their midst like a living missile, her claws rending armor and flesh with equal ease. Her enhanced strength allowed her to lift warriors twice her size and hurl them into their companions. Her improved speed made her nearly impossible to target, a blur of motion that struck from unexpected angles. 10 warriors fell in the first 10 seconds, their plasma rifles discharged wildly, some hitting their own forces in the chaos. Kira caught one blast on her forearm, the energy dispersing harmlessly across her metallic skin. She grabbed the warrior who had fired and used him as a weapon, swinging his body to clear a path through his companions. But even enhanced, she was still outnumbered. The Kethmori adapted quickly, forming overlapping fields of fire that forced her to take cover. Plasma bolts scorched the air around her, and molecular flensors began breaking down the stone pillars she used for protection. Vexenal had regained his footing, his damaged leg joint sealed by emergency repair systems. His gravity field generator activated at maximum power, trying to pin Kira to the floor. She felt the crushing weight but pushed through it, her enhanced muscles straining against the artificial gravity well. A sonic disruptor caught her in its field, the subsonic waves designed to liquefy internal organs. But her restructured nervous system was no longer vulnerable to the same frequencies. She advanced through the killing field, her ears bleeding, but her motor functions intact. She reached the nearest warrior and drove her claws through his torso, lifting him off the ground. His death throes triggered his weapon's auto-fire system, plasma bolts spraying randomly across the chamber. 3 of his companions fell to friendly fire before Kira discarded his corpse. The battle was becoming a massacre, but not the one Vexenal had intended. Kira's enhanced capabilities were turning the numerical advantage against itself. In the confusion of close combat, the Kethmori were hitting their own forces as often as their target. Bodies piled up around the throne, green ichor mixing with pulverized stone, but the enhancement was unsustainable. Kira could feel her cellular structure beginning to destabilize as the retrovirus consumed her body's resources. She had minutes before total system failure, perhaps less. Vexenal seemed to sense her weakness. He pressed his attack, his remaining plasma cannon firing in rapid sequence while his other weapon systems provided supporting fire. A gravity pulse slammed Kira into the ceiling, then yanked her back down to the floor hard enough to crack the obsidian. She landed badly, her left arm twisted at an unnatural angle. The enhanced healing was struggling to keep up with the accumulating damage. For the first time since the transformation, she felt vulnerable. The warlord loomed over her, his massive form blocking out the light. Clever, desperate, but ultimately futile. "You cannot win." Kira looked up at him, her glowing eyes still defiant. Winning was never the objective. Before he could process her words, the chamber's emergency lighting activated. Klaxons began wailing throughout the fortress, their discordant sound indicating catastrophic system failure. Above them, in the debris field that had once been the human fleet, the real battle was just beginning. The klaxons were followed by a voice speaking in the Kethmori military dialect Fortress Command, reporting massive energy signatures approaching from the outer system. Vexenal's compound eyes widened as he processed the tactical data, being fed directly to his neural implants. Impossible, he snarled. Your fleet was destroyed. We watched your ships burn. Kira's smile was terrible to behold. Her enhanced features twisted into an expression of pure satisfaction. Those weren't our ships. Those were decoys. The fortress shuddered as something massive struck the outer defensive screens. Emergency power systems activated throughout the complex, bathing everything in crimson light. Through the transparent sections of the throne room's dome, they could see flashes of weapons fire in the void above. While you were busy conquering empty shells, Kira continued, her voice growing stronger as adrenaline overrode the cellular degradation. The real Terran defense fleet was building in the shadow of Jupiter. We learned patience from you. We learned brutality. And we learned that sometimes you have to sacrifice everything to win. Another impact, stronger this time. Pieces of debris began falling from the ceiling. As the fortress's structural integrity started to fail, the surviving Kethmori warriors looked upward nervously, their formation beginning to waver. Vexenal's tactical feeds showed him the impossible truth. The human fleet that had burned above Kepler 442 had been composed entirely of automated vessels, stuffed with sensor packages and transmitters to convince Kethmori intelligence that they were destroying the real thing. While his forces celebrated their victory, the actual human fleet had been waiting in the outer system, watching, learning, preparing. And now they were here in overwhelming force. You came here to die, the Warlord realized. I came here to keep you distracted, Kira corrected. She struggled to her feet, her damaged body protesting every movement. The nanobiological agents I released when this started, they're not weapons. They're beacons. Every warrior I touched, every drop of alien blood that made contact with my skin, it's all tagged now, marked for precision targeting. The implications crashed over Vexenal like a tidal wave. The fortress's shields were designed to protect against external threats, not guided munitions that could target specific biological signatures within the structure. If the humans had samples of Kethmori DNA, if they could distinguish between species at the molecular level, orbital bombardment will destroy us all, he pointed out, including you. I was dead the moment I triggered the enhancement virus, Kira admitted. My cellular structure is already breaking down. I've got maybe 10 minutes before total organ failure. She activated her sixth implant, the one that would ensure her death served a purpose. Quantum entanglement transmitters embedded in her modified brain began broadcasting targeting data directly to the human fleet. Every Kethmori in the chamber was now being tracked in real time, their positions relayed to orbital weapons systems with pinpoint accuracy. The fortress shuddered again. As the first precision strikes found their marks, explosions bloomed throughout the structure as kinetic rounds punched through the shields and hull plating to target specific locations. The human weapons were surgical in their precision, avoiding critical life support systems, while systematically eliminating military targets. Vexenal's warrior guard began falling as hypervelocity penetrators found them with impossible accuracy. The rounds were small, barely larger than rifle bullets, but they struck with the kinetic energy of artillery shells. Warriors simply vanished in sprays of green mist and shattered chitin. You magnificent bitch, the warlord whispered, and there was genuine admiration in his voice. You planned this entire thing, the surrender, the seemingly impossible assault on my fortress, the desperate last stand. All of it was theater. Not all of it, Kira replied, dodging a falling beam as another section of ceiling collapsed. The part where I kill you personally, that's completely sincere. She launched herself at him with the last of her enhanced strength, claws extended. But the cellular breakdown was accelerating, her movements becoming sluggish and uncoordinated. Vexenal caught her by the throat with his massive hand, lifting her off the ground. You may have doomed my forces, he said, his grip tightening around her windpipe, but you'll die knowing you failed to kill me. Kira's response was to grab his wrist with both hands and trigger her seventh and final implant, the fusion reactor embedded in her chest. Cavity activated. It was a miniaturized version of the power plants that drove human starships. Compressed into a package no larger than a human heart, the technology was theoretical, untested, and almost certainly fatal to implement, but it would produce enough energy to power her enhanced body for exactly 97 seconds. 97 seconds of impossible strength, speed, and endurance. 97 seconds to finish what she had started. Her claws punched through Vexnal's armor plating like it was tissue paper, sinking deep into the flesh beneath. The Warlord roared in pain and fury, his remaining plasma cannon swiveling to target her at point-blank range. But Kira was already moving, her fusion-powered muscles propelling her with impossible speed. She tore his weapon arm off at the shoulder, sending sparks cascading across the throne room. Greenacre fontained from the wound, but Vexnal was far from finished. His other weapons systems activated in sequence, micromissiles, sonic disruptors, gravity manipulation, all firing simultaneously. The throne room became a storm of destruction as the two enhanced beings fought with superhuman intensity. Kira's claws left deep gouges in the Warlord's armor while his attacks pulverized stone and metal around them. They moved too fast for the surviving warriors to track, their battle a blur of violence and fury. Above them, the human fleet continued its systematic destruction of the fortress. Precision strikes eliminated weapon emplacements, communication, arrays, and power distribution nodes. The HFY were being methodically dismantled, their technology turned against them by an enemy that had studied their weaknesses. With obsessive detail, 60 seconds remaining. Kira felt the fusion reactor beginning to destabilize as her body rejected the foreign technology. But she was close now, so close she could taste victory. Vexnal was wounded, his movements slowing as damage accumulated. His armor was breached in dozens of places, vital systems failing one by one. 30 seconds. She got inside his guard and drove both claws toward his throat. He caught her wrists, his massive hands stopping her attack just inches from his neck. They strained against each other, enhanced strength against cybernetic augmentation, fury against desperation. 10 seconds. Kira smiled one last time and whispered the activation code for her 8th implant, the one she had never told anyone about. The 8th implant wasn't a weapon or an enhancement. It was insurance, a quantum encrypted data core containing every piece of intelligence the human military had gathered about HFY technology, tactics, and territorial holdings. 3 years of desperate espionage, captured technical specifications, and strategic analysis, all compressed into a crystalline matrix smaller than a grain of sand, and embedded in her brainstem. But more than that, it contained the location of every HFY world, every military installation, every breeding colony in their empire, the complete order of battle for a species that had conquered half the galaxy. When Kira whispered the activation code, the data core began broadcasting on quantum frequencies that could penetrate any known shielding. Technology, the information, flooded outward at faster-than-light speeds, reaching human listening posts scattered throughout the galaxy in seconds. Vexnal realized what was happening as his tactical feeds began registering quantum transmissions from Kira's location. His enhanced intellect processed the implications instantly. Total intelligence compromise, the end of strategic surprise, the collapse of every operational security protocol his species had developed over millennia. "You didn't come here to kill me," he breathed, his grip on her wrists loosening in shock. "You came here to destroy us all." Both, Kira corrected. The fusion reactor in her chest reached critical mass. For an instant, she burned with the light of a star, her body becoming pure energy. The explosion vaporized everything within 50 meters of the throne, including Vexnal's massive form, his armor, his cybernetic enhancements, his collection of human trophies. All of it simply ceased to exist in a flash of nuclear fire. The blast wave traveled through the fortress like the fist of an angry god, shattering bulkheads and collapsing entire sections. Emergency force fields activated to contain the damage, but the structure's integrity was already compromised by the orbital bombardment. Secondary explosions rippled through the complex as power conduits overloaded and ammunition stores detonated. When the light faded, Nothing remained of the throne room but a sphere of molten stone. At its center, a small crater marked the spot where two warriors had fought their final battle. The surviving HFY throughout the fortress found themselves leaderless, their command structure decapitated, without BlackHFY's strategic genius. To coordinate their defense, they fought as individuals rather than a unified force. The human bombardment picked them off systematically, the quantum targeting data allowing for surgical precision. That left the fortress infrastructure intact while eliminating every alien defender. Within an hour, Fortress BlackHFY was silent. Admiral Helena Cross stood in the ruins of the throne room 3 days later, her environmental suit protecting her from the residual radiation. The molten crater had cooled into a glass-smooth bowl that reflected the emergency lighting in prismatic patterns. Scattered around it were fragments of alien armor and weapons, the only evidence of the battle that had taken place here. We found traces of her DNA in the blast residue, reported her aide, Lieutenant Commander Torres. Enough to confirm identity. Cross nodded, unsurprised. The mission planners had given Kira a 0% chance of survival, but she had insisted on going anyway. The plan required someone to get close to BlackHFY to ensure the targeting data reached the orbital weapons, and there had been only one volunteer. The intelligence transmission, Cross asked. Complete data dump received at all listening posts, Torres confirmed. We know the location of every major HFY installation. Fleet Command is already planning simultaneous strikes across 17 systems. Cross walked to the edge of the crater and looked down into its depths. Somewhere in that fused stone were the remains of General Kira Voss, the woman who had single-handedly turned the tide of an interstellar war. The official reports would credit superior tactics and technological advancement, but Cross knew the truth. One human had walked into a fortress filled with 300 aliens and emerged victorious. Any word from the outer colonies? She asked. Liberation fleets have reached Kepler 442 and New Byzantium, Torres reported. The HFY garrison forces surrendered without resistance. Once they learned of BlackHFY's death, apparently their entire command structure was built around personal loyalty to the Warlord. It was a weakness the humans had identified early in the war. The HFY were apex predators by evolution, accustomed to hierarchical pack structures with a single, dominant leader. Remove that leader, and the entire organization collapsed into chaos. Cross activated her suit's recording system and began her report for the historical archives. Future generations would need to understand what had happened here, why one woman's sacrifice had saved humanity from extinction. Personal log, Admiral Helena Cross, Commanding Officer, 1st Liberation Fleet. The operation to eliminate Warlord BlackHFY has concluded successfully. General Voss completed her mission objectives at the cost of her life, providing tactical intelligence that allowed for precision orbital bombardment of Fortress BlackHFY. She paused, looking around at the devastation. The fortress had been the symbol of HFY power, an impregnable stronghold that had withstood sieges from a dozen species. Now it was a tomb, its halls echoing with the ghosts of the defeated. The general's tactical assessment proved correct. The HFY value individual strength above strategic thinking. They expected a conventional assault, perhaps a negotiated surrender. They could not conceive of an enemy willing to sacrifice everything for a psychological victory. Cross walked to where BlackHFY's throne had stood, now just a patch of melted stone. She thought about the Warlord's final moments. Trapped in single combat with an enemy who had already accepted death, there was something almost poetic about it. The ultimate predator, master of 1,000 worlds, brought down by prey that refused to submit. The war is not over, she continued. The HFY Empire still controls significant territory and possesses formidable military assets, but their strategic advantage has been eliminated. They can no longer strike from the shadows, cannot rely on the fear and uncertainty that made them seem invincible. She bent down and picked up a fragment of alien armor, its surface scarred by energy weapons and molecular cutting tools. The metal was still warm from the battle's aftermath. General Voss asked me to deliver a message if she didn't survive the mission. She said that humanity's greatest weapon was not our technology or our tactics, but our willingness to die for something greater than ourselves. The HFY fight for dominance. For the pleasure of conquest, we fight for survival, for the right to exist, for the future of our children. Cross stood and walked toward the chamber's exit, her boots crunching on debris and scattered weapons. Behind her, the crater reflected emergency lights like a fallen star. That difference, she concluded, will ultimately decide this war. The Liberation Fleet departed Fortress Vexthara 12 hours later, leaving behind a skeleton crew to study the captured technology. The massive structure would eventually be converted into a human research facility. Its weapons turned against its former masters, but in the depths of the fortress, in the molten crater where the warriors had fought their final battle, something remarkable happened. The quantum entanglement transmitters in Kira's remains continued to broadcast, sending out a signal that reached every corner of human space. It was not tactical data or strategic intelligence. It was something simpler, more profound. A message that said, "We are still here. We did not surrender. We did not break. We are human, and we endure." Across 17 systems, as liberation fleets struck at HFY strongholds, the message was received and understood. Humanity had found its voice again, had remembered what it meant to fight not for conquest but for survival, not for glory but for the right to exist. The war would continue for another 2 years, but its outcome was no longer in doubt. The HFY had made a fundamental miscalculation. They had assumed that a species capable of sacrifice was weak, that warriors willing to die for their cause were defeated. They had laughed when she entered alone, that now their empire burned, and in the ashes of their greatest fortress, a small crater served as humanity's answer to anyone who would dare enslave them. They had learned, too late, that the most dangerous enemy is not the one who fights to win, but the one who fights to ensure their enemy loses. General Kira Voss had entered Fortress Vexthara as one human against 300 aliens. She had left it as something more, a symbol, a rallying cry, a promise that humanity would never again bow to those who mistake mercy for weakness. In the end, that had made all the difference.